Hi, and welcome to What's Happening Chinese Edition. We're here today in the Lexington Community Center with Peter Lee. Hi, Peter.
Hey, Steve.
Can you tell me about some of CAAL's programs and initiatives?
The mission statement referred to about giving a voice to Chinese American residents and to encourage participation and volunteerism. We've always tried to stay true to that, so the activities that we have sort of fulfill those roles. Early on, we did Chinese New Year. We do every other year a big Chinese New Year thing. It's evolved. Now it's, I think the first time we started in the basement of the Chinese Bible Church over on Spring Street. It's every other year, so the past 3 or 4 times, maybe 5 over 10 years, we've been at the Minuteman High School. So we're able to host about 350 guests and also some entertainment, sort of cultural, performances. That's worked out very well.
Can you tell me more about yourself and when you came to Lexington?
We moved to Lexington, my family and I moved to Lexington about 24 years ago. Mm-hmm. We're fortunate enough to find a nice place in Lexington, and with a little help from my parents, we were able to afford a house and moved to Lexington for the school system, and it's a great town to raise a family.
What was your first impression when you moved to Lexington?
Actually, it's funny. I grew up in Winchester, mm-hmm. and had a lot of friends in Lexington. And when I finally moved to Lexington, and the first day that I went from work and commuted back home, I took a bus to Lexington Center, and I sat on a park bench and I just sat down and I couldn't believe it. It's like, I live here now. This is my town. I can say I live in Lexington. It was a really great moment for me.
Thinking back when you first came here,
mm-hmm.
How was Lexington different from the other towns?
Well, Lexington, so I grew up in Winchester. Winchester didn't have a lot of activities for kids, for young families, and the friends that I had in Lexington, there always seemed to be a lot of stuff to do. There was the Wallachs, roller skating, bowling, mini golf. There was Chadwick's. I remember fondly coming to Chadwick's and hanging out with my friends in Lexington. And so that seemed to be the place to, in high school, seemed like, it would be a great place to live. And so finally, after moving to Lexington, sort of it all came true.
What inspired you to get involved in CAAL?
A lot of it was just getting involved in the community. I think back in '95, CAAL actually had started. They were sort of a group of families got together to do an override. I think in the late '80s, there was an override, and a bunch of families figured they had to do something to get the override passed. And they worked on the campaign. It passed, and they said, "Okay, done." And so it sort of disbanded. And was inactive for a while. And then in the early mid-90s, the Chinese American population was growing, and there was a need to provide a voice for Chinese American residents. And as far as local politics, the ballot initiatives, different opportunities to provide some input and give a voice to Chinese American residents. So that was a big part. And also, if your friends are doing something, you want to do something with them. And so in '95, they decided they were going to get back together and reform CAAL. And so I was part of that group. It's turned out over the 21 years that I've been there, it's changed a lot. CAAL originally, with a small Chinese American population, it was, sort of get parents involved. It was cultural education. It was diversity awareness. And, when your Chinese New Year came around, you'd go to your kid's classroom and say, well, this is what Chinese New Year is, And so it has evolved from that to more, providing a voice for Chinese Americans, to actually getting people involved, sort of an assimilation, having local residents realize, okay, you live here, you should be involved, you should help out. And Lexington is all about volunteerism. So, you should help out, where you feel comfortable and, be part of the community, be part of the fabric of the community.
How has the mission of CAAL changed from when it was started to today?
The mission has pretty much been the same. It's to help provide a voice for Chinese American residents in town for like local politics and public school education, and to give them an opportunity to get involved in town, to volunteer and give back to the community, to be part of the community. But the role of CAAL has evolved to include the assimilation and to more actively encourage people to get involved in the community. As the president, we called it a mini Citizens Academy. We had the Board of Selectmen come in, and we had the school committee come in, a representative, and talk about what they do. And I represented town meeting because I've been in town meeting for about 10 years. And the part about getting involved, I tried to boil it down to something that people would understand. And so I said it would be, your skills and your schedule. So whatever skills you felt comfortable with, whatever skills you felt you would able bring to the table, and the hours that you were able to contribute. One of the other organizations that I've been volunteering with is 2020 Vision. It's a strategic visioning operation. And so the thought was, in the year 2020, what do you want Lexington to look like? The 2020 committee did a subcommittee several years ago. It was a demographic change, a subcommittee on demographic change. And so I was part of that. That actually is the first of two phases. The first phase was to try and understand what the barriers to participation were. The Chinese American, the Asian population has been growing exponentially in the past 15, 20 years. And for us to get involved, for people to get involved, the town wanted to figure out, were there barriers? What were the barriers? What could everybody do to sort of lower the barriers or encourage people to get involved? And what we had found was that people, two-income families, so there's not a lot of time. You've got work, you've got your family, you've got, you're trying to get your kids in school, help with the homework, and so there really wasn't a lot of time outside of the family. And the other barriers, one of the barriers was identifying opportunities. If I lived in town and I thought, yeah, I could do something, you would always be wondering, well, where do I go? How can I contribute? And so we thought CAAL would be a good way sort of to identify opportunities, to get involved, find places for people to get involved, find opportunities where they could, contribute a meaningful, make a meaningful contribution. So mostly it was in schools because, you're involved with your kid in elementary school or middle school or high school. And there's always PTAs or PTOs, room parents and school activities. So we figured that's where most people were getting involved. But we thought to take it to the next level, would be language barriers, I think was one, because people can speak pretty good English, but they don't think they speak well. And so they would say, oh, I can't volunteer because my English is so terrible. And really it's not. So, the whole thing of trying to find the right opportunities for people to feel comfortable contributing skills that they, feel are their strengths.
I'd like to back up to something you said earlier about Chinese who speak English so that people can understand it, but they don't think they do. And thus they don't want to get involved in these meetings. Do you think that by getting involved in the meetings, it might help them be able to practice their English more and to get more confidence in the fact that they can speak English?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, I think their English is pretty good anyways. It's maybe more of a confidence thing. So if they're given an opportunity to contribute and, people, they're in a group and people can understand what they're saying perfectly well, then that excuse of, I don't speak English very well, that sort of goes away. So absolutely, I think giving them an opportunity to not so much practice, but to prove to themselves that their English is certainly good enough. And in the situations where they're not good enough, and you can work with people and try and figure out what it is you need to say or want to say.
There are several groups of Chinese in the Lexington area. You have those from mainland China, possibly also those from Hong Kong, and you also have those from Taiwan. Are there any issues between those different groups?
I think in some ways, my joke inside joke has always been that the Chinese people are the most racist of all ethnicities. I mean, people from the north think, our cuisine is better than, the people from the south, or people from Hong Kong think, this is better than, I mean, it's an ethnic pride. It's not really a racist thing, but, so there's also the political history. I mean, the folks in time, the nationalists, after the communists took over, they went to Taiwan, and so they've sort of developed a culture there. But to simplify, yeah, they're both China, but I think there's some differences of opinion. The other take on that is people like myself who were born in America. So we're Chinese, and so-called ABCs, American-born Chinese. So, anytime there's sort of tension or differences of opinion between mainland Chinese and, the Chinese from Taiwan, or even, people that immigrated with my parents' generation, 25, 50 years ago, to the recent wave, maybe in the past 2 decades or so. There are differences there as well. And my thought is always, well, you guys, first of all, you're all in America now. So, you have a common Chinese history. And, there's people like me who are the most underrepresented within CAAL of the American-born Chinese people. So, let's sort of play together. Let's all work together and play nice. And those types of minor differences really aren't that important. And so to sort of smooth over that, it's to show that, everybody's in America now, regardless of, past history or where your ancestors were from, or, it's really not that important, because now you're in Lexington and you share, you're all Lexington residents now. And I think that's more important than the sort of the political, or what may have happened in the past.
How has CAAL helped to bring these groups together?
I think it's to show that there's something that Chinese Americans can contribute to Lexington. Again, it's not so much where you came from, it's what you can do moving forward in the present and in the future. And CAAL has been very much involved in trying to represent Chinese Americans regardless of where you're from, and contribute to society, to the town, the fabric of the town, by volunteering. And the phrase we've always used is giving back, being part of the community and being proud of it, contributing something that the town needs and you can do as well. So that's one way that CAAL has helped, I think. Also, we've worked closely with town government, and so anytime there are sort of questions on what we can do or what we should do, the involvement with the 2020 Vision Committee, so that first subcommittee on demographic change looked at what can we do to make to lower the barriers of involvement, to Chinese American involvement in town. The second phase of that, ongoing, is actually they've identified through census data information where towns sort of similar to Lexington, but have a very high proportion, 30, 40, 50%, maybe sometimes more, of Asian residents. I think it's about 12 to 20, somewhere in there, but lots of them are either on the West Coast or, believe it or not, in New Jersey. So we've interviewed representatives from those communities and just sort of said, well, gee, sort of trying to learn from their experiences. As the Asian population increased, what hardships did you find? What things did you do? Both from an Asian perspective, and we tried to interview other town leaders to try and figure out, well, what was sort of the cooperation, or what steps helped, maybe what steps didn't help, and so Lexington could try and learn something from that. And actually, I have to say, one of the things that have come out of it is that not many of those communities have an organization like CAAL. So I think that's a great thing, to know that CAAL can help sort of bridge the gap and encourage Asian American, Chinese American residents to give back, and can work with the town government, town meeting, and different boards and organizations to encourage, and identify opportunities for Chinese American residents, Asian American residents to participate.